Hey there, welcome to the recap of Beauty in Black Season 1, Part 2 by Tyler Perry. Let's dive in. Harold kicks things off with a panicked call to Norman. Horace has requested a meeting, and Harold is convinced it's a setup. As a judge, he's played fast and loose with the law, and now the walls are closing in. He knows that if Horace is onto him, his secrets won't stay buried for long. Meanwhile, Mallory and Roy arrive at the scene of Charles' supposed murder. The sight is grim. A bullet-riddled, burned-out car with a charred body inside. Horace arrives soon after, visibly shaken by the sight of the wreckage. Despite his complicated relationship with Charles, something about this moment cuts deep. Without hesitation, he orders Mallory to gather everyone at the house. A reckoning is coming. Tony and Olivia are tangled in bed, but their motives couldn't be further apart. Tony is falling hard, but Olivia is only interested in securing more power within the company. Her ambitions are put on hold when Mallory calls, revealing the shocking news of Charles's death. Olivia immediately assumes Norman is responsible, and her grief turns into something sharper. She wants revenge. The evidence at the scene paints a clear picture: a body wearing Charles's watch, a car riddled with bullets, and the unmistakable stench of death. As far as anyone is concerned, Charles is gone. While the Bellary family unravels, Kimmie and Angel are on their own desperate mission to find Kimmie's missing sister, Sylvie. Kimmie calls her mother for answers, only to be met with a devastating truth. Her mother, Leslie, sold Sylvie out after she dared to speak up about being abused by the same man who once violated Kimmie. And instead of remorse, Leslie defends him, insisting that he's quote to her. The betrayal is almost too much to bear. Kimmie warns her mother, if Sylvie isn't found, she's coming for her next. Blinded by rage, Kimmie wants to storm Horace's house, convinced he's the one running the strip club. Angel urges her to slow down, to check other leads before making a move they can't take back. Rain is awake and recovering when Kimmie calls, venting about everything that's happened. Sensing the danger Kimmie is about to walk into, Rain offers up an alternative: Delinda's address. If there's any chance Sylvie is there, that's where Kimmie should go first. Back at the Bellary estate, the family gathers for a volatile meeting. Norman is absent, but his name dominates the conversation. Jules folds immediately, confessing that Norman was behind the hit on Charles. Horace doesn't hesitate. He declares war on his own brother and orders Jules to bring Norman in by any means necessary. As tensions boil over, Roy seizes the moment to confront his father. He asks if his father wishes it had been him in the car, instead of Charles. Without hesitation, Horace says yes. The words cut deep, but Roy isn't surprised. He's spent his whole life as an afterthought, receiving no love, no warmth, nothing from either of his parents. Their father was incapable of it, and their mother gave every ounce of love she had to Charles. When Roy calls them out on it, Olivia reacts with cold fury, throwing a knife that narrowly misses his head. A warning. A dismissal. A message. Shut up. Roy storms out, and Mallory follows, but not to offer comfort. She has a proposition. If Charles was murdered by someone outside the family, his shares should pass to Roy. And if Roy claims those shares, she could divorce him and walk away with a fortune. But Roy, still raw from grief, refuses to play her game. His brother is dead, and right now, that's all that matters. Heartbroken, Varney goes to Charles's home to retrieve a suit for the funeral. But as he sits in his house mourning, he's met with an impossible sight: Charles himself, walking through the door. The truth is almost laughable. Charles was never in that car. A stripper drugged him, stole his car and watch, and left him unconscious. Varney warns him to be more careful as he was the intended target. But the night isn't over. Kimmie, fueled by fury and desperation, storms into Delinda's home with a gun in hand. She fires warning shots, demanding answers. Delinda, smug and unbothered, refuses to cooperate. And in that moment, Kimmie makes a choice, one that can't be undone. She pulls the trigger and blows Delinda's brains out. Damn, that's 2 bodies in a row. With Norman still on the loose, Mallory decides to change the plan. Instead of capturing him, she tells Jules to find a scapegoat to take the fall for Ina's murder. Jules is soon called to Kimmie's motel, where the police are investigating a grisly scene. Kimmie had driven her car into body, killing her instantly. Among the onlookers, Calvin finds a witness, a young man named Debo. During questioning, Debo identifies Kimmie as responsible for the incident. Seizing the opportunity, Jules invites Debo to come with them, promising him a hefty reward. But once he's in their custody, Jules orders Calvin to drug him, ensuring he'll be too impaired to defend himself when they frame him. At the Bellary mansion, everyone waits for Jules to return with Norman. Instead, Norman arrives on his own, throwing the household into shock. He immediately accuses Horace of orchestrating Ina's murder. Though we know Mallory and Roy are the true culprits, Horace instead mocks Norman, belittling his love for Ina and calling her a mail-order wife, ridiculing him for not even managing to marry someone younger. Before the argument escalates further, an even bigger shock arrives. Charles walks in, very much alive. The entire family is stunned, given that Charles was presumed dead. Varney quickly explains away the confusion, claiming that Charles's car had been stolen. The culprit was on the way to rob the house. Olivia, however, remains unfazed, still vowing revenge. Norman presses for answers. Why was Charles's car at the tow yard Ina was found? Charles insists he has no idea, but Varney says the car was stolen at the time. Jules then arrives, bringing Debo into the room. Drugged and incoherent, the young man gives a slurred confession, claiming he was trying to rob the house and killed Ina on the way. Jules puts on a performance, assuring Norman that justice will be served. To further cement the lie, he has doctored AI footage as evidence. Kimmie is desperate for answers about her missing sister. She has Angel drive her to her mother's house, where she learns the horrifying truth. Her mother, Leslie, sold Sylvie to buy a car. Kimmie is furious, but before she can do anything, Leslie's boyfriend, Frank, steps in. He hurls insults at Kimmie, calling her names and mocking her for how she earns money. When she retaliates, Frank beats her down. The situation takes a dark turn until Angel intervenes, wielding a shotgun. Unlike Kimmie, he doesn't pull the trigger. But Kimmie makes a chilling promise. If it's the last thing she does, she will kill Frank. Harold, who is visibly terrified, arrives to see Horace. Though Harold initially claims he hasn't spoken to Norman, Horace isn't fooled. To force the truth out of him, he takes an extreme measure, threatening him with dynamite. Overcome with fear, Harold finally confesses. Years ago, Norman had devised a scheme to launder money through the family business. When Horace shut it down, he instead funneled millions through a strip club and several car dealerships. However, Harold claims to have no knowledge of where the money originally came from. Later, Horace speaks to Varney, telling him he hates his sons and they have never worked a day in their lives. He orders Varney to find a legal loophole to ensure neither Charles nor Roy inherit his shares. The only way to accomplish that? Horace needs to remarry. If he dies, his assets would pass to his wife instead of his sons. Additionally, he instructs Varney to resolve the ongoing lawsuit against Beauty in Black, which has been haunting the company. Roy talks to Mallory about the incident at the house with his parents, contemplating ending his life. Perhaps that would make them care. But Mallory, cold as ever, doesn't show an ounce of concern. Instead, she taunts him. Roy shifts the conversation, asking who Mallory is sleeping with. She refuses to answer, saying she doesn't kiss and tell. Roy turns to Calvin, confronting him about the affair. Thinking quickly, Calvin deflects suspicion by pretending to be interested in Roy instead of Mallory. Disgusted, Roy warns him never to talk to him that way again and storms off. Calvin, amused by the deception, laughs as he leaves. Seeking an escape, Roy turns to drugs, snorting a line of cocaine in his office. Afterwards, he calls Kimmie, summoning her to a hotel. Kimmie agrees, but not for the reason Roy expects. She sees this as an opportunity to dig deeper into her sister's disappearance. Jules learns that Kimmie is behind the murders of Buddy and Delinda, and he knows this could be a disaster if Norman finds out. So he orders his dirty cops to track Kimmie down and clean up any evidence before Norman catches wind of it. To get to her faster, he also tells them to locate Rain, believing she might lead them straight to Kimmie. But there's a problem. Rain has been quietly transferred to another hospital, and Jules has no idea where. Someone is moving behind the scenes, and he does not like it. Olivia's paranoia is in full force as she accuses Tony of betraying her. But here's the real twist. The robbery at Horace's place, the one we thought Kimmie and Angel botched, that was actually Olivia's plan all along. With Tony in charge of logistics, the goal was simple. Horace was supposed to die during the heist. But now that he's alive and breathing, he's bound to track down the robbers, which means he'll find Tony and eventually Olivia. And Olivia doesn't do loose ends. Without hesitation, she has Tony killed. And Olivia barely blinks. Just another problem handled. Varney brings Horace a game-changing piece of information. According to their father's will, any family member who commits a felony loses their shares. And that includes Class B felonies, like running an illegal business. Like Norman's strip club. Sensing an opportunity, Horace calls Jules and asks him to track down Angel. But Jules isn't an idiot. He immediately gets suspicious and tips off Norman instead. Norman instantly assumes Harold must have spilled their secrets to Horace. He wastes no time confronting Harold, who's now sweating bullets, caught between two powerful brothers who both see him as a liability. Harold swears he hasn't said a word, but with his family's safety hanging in the balance, how long can he really hold out? Varney warns Charles to be very careful, especially when it comes to his drug habit. If Charles gets caught with illegal substances, their father will have the perfect excuse to cut him out of the will entirely. Lena calls Mallory, officially rejecting her job offer and pushing for a settlement instead. But she makes one thing very clear. If Mallory doesn't play ball, things are going to get ugly. The call ends on a tense note, and Varney, sensing danger, urges Mallory to bring in a litigator who could truly rattle Lena, and also advises her to talk to Horace about his plans to rewrite the will. Mallory, seemingly enjoying Calvin's habit of overstepping his bounds, hugs Varney to make Calvin jealous. Problem? Roy walks in at the worst possible moment. Seeing the hug, he immediately assumes Varney is the affair partner he's been searching for. Roy goes full Roy. He demands that Varney be fired on the spot, and even challenges him to a fistfight in the parking lot. But Mallory just shrugs off Roy's theatrics, saying she'll handle it herself. Jillian tries to patch things up with Calvin, but he's not having it. In a last-ditch attempt, she threatens to tell Roy all about Calvin's affair, hoping to get a reaction. But Calvin? He doesn't even flinch. He tells Gillian to stay out of his life and walks away. Angel is tracked down by police while driving a stolen car, but these are Jules's dirty cops. He's dragged to an abandoned warehouse, where Horace confronts him about stealing his watch. Horace actually wanted to help Angel and Kimmie, even giving them a place to stay, but they ruined that when they tried to rob him. Now, there's no going back. Angel swears it won't happen again and tries to salvage the situation by vouching for Kimmie. When Horace asks if she can be trusted, Angel insists she can, and he's willing to tell Horace everything about her. Oh, and one more thing. Horace says he has a crush on Angel, making it hard to kill him. Closeted ass. Kimmie finally comes to see Roy in a hotel room, but she's not here for what he thinks. She demands to know where Sylvie is. She calls him by his real name, proving she knows everything about his family. That's when Roy realizes she's the one who called his wife. In a blind rage, Roy lashes out at Kimmie. After a scuffle, she pushes him out the window. Kimmie sneaks into Delinda's place, rummaging through her belongings in a desperate search for clues about Sylvie's whereabouts. She leaves fingerprints everywhere. Not exactly the best idea, but she's too desperate to care. Her search is cut short when Jules's dirty cops arrive. Thinking fast, she ducks behind the sofa as they survey the wreckage. Delinda's place is a disaster. A clear sign that something big went down. But without any immediate leads, they leave, unaware that their target was mere feet away. Angel is busy trying to talk his way out of trouble with Horace. He explains that robbing him was a stupid mistake, driven by desperation for a better life. He even confesses he got Kimmie rolled up with the stripping life, but insists that the robbers weren't his people. His crew didn't even show up that night. Horace simply states, "I know," but that doesn't change the fact that they still tried to rob him. Varney approaches Charles, worried that Roy might expose his supposed affair with Mallory. Of course, we know there's no affair, but Varney is rattled enough to give Charles a heads up. Charles, however, doesn't take it seriously. He's already got another lover in the next room, and he doesn't even bother hiding it. Varney, refusing to leave, stays long enough to hear everything as Charles and his new boy toy hook up. Once the deed is done, Varney finally speaks his mind. He confesses his love for Charles, and admits that when he thought Charles was dead, he realized how much he truly cared. But Charles throws it back in his face, reminding him that he wouldn't even hold his hand in front of his parents. Varney says he's ready to tell Charles' parents about their relationship, if Charles commits to him. But Charles isn't willing. Back at the motel, Kimmie finds it eerily vacant. No cops, no patrols. Angel soon arrives after escaping Horace, and the two barely have time to catch their breath before Jules shows up, demanding to know where Kimmie is. Angel, thinking fast, tells Kimmie to hide under the bed and insists to Jules that she's not there. Jules shoots at the bed just in case. He then questions Angel about his meeting with Horace. Angel spins an elaborate lie, claiming he stole from Horace at a hospital but has never met him personally. He paints himself as just another unlucky thief caught in a mess. Jules seems to buy it, for now. He leaves, but it turns out Kimmie was never under the bed. She had squeezed herself inside a tiny wardrobe, barely avoiding death. Horace doesn't waste time hunting for answers. He visits Rain and demands information on Kimmie's whereabouts. When she refuses, he decides to get creative. Using his cane, he prods her botched BBL, causing her excruciating pain. Unfortunately, Kimmie overhears everything. She's on the phone at the time, and, unable to stand by while her friend suffers, races out of the motel. But her escape is cut short when one of Jules's dirty cops catches her and snatches her up. At the club, Jules has stationed another cop, Alex, at the front counter of his strip club, Delinda's old spot. Angel, following Rain's advice to return and act normal and get information, shows up and tries to blend in. One of the male strippers gives Angel the lowdown on what has been happening in the club and suggests they follow through with another scheme. The one the stripper who stole Charles' car had in mind before he died in the crash, robbed Charles's apartment. Angel declines, telling him he wants nothing to do with it. Charles arranges a meeting with Mallory, supposedly out of concern for the family. But she sees through him immediately. "Why are we really here?" she asks. Charles dodges before finally getting to the point. "Are you sleeping with Varney?" Mallory shuts it down immediately, demanding to know why he even cares. Sensing the conversation turning against him, Charles shifts the subject, asking about the family instead. But Mallory isn't fooled. "You don't care about this family," she says flatly. Charles, deflecting, tells her to loosen up, drink, party, have some fun. But Mallory isn't interested. She leaves, while Charles stays behind, drowning himself in the nightlife. The episode closes with Kimmie, still trapped in the dirty cop's car, making her move. She pepper sprays him mid-drive, causing the car to crash. After the car crash, Kimmie manages to escape by stealing a random woman's car. Kimmie arrives at the hospital to find Horace, demanding to know where Sylvie is. Horace explains that he had no idea about Norman and Jules' illegal activities until recently, but offers Kimmie a way out, return to normal life, and gather intel on Norman while Horace looks into things for her. Kimmie tells Horace everything, including how she pushed Roy out of the window just hours ago. Horace is shaken. Mallory calls Jules, demanding to know who Roy has been sleeping with. Jules gives her the hotel address, and Mallory heads over, planning to catch Roy and the person in the act. When Mallory arrives, she's given a key and finds the place a mess. Roy is alive, but badly hurt from falling off a balcony. Despite his condition, Mallory refuses to call for an ambulance, preferring to handle the situation herself. She arranges for Calvin to help her get Roy to the hospital, without drawing attention. They sneak Roy out through the fire exit and into the underground parking lot, heading for the private wing of the hospital owned by the family. At the strip club, Charles is approached by the "Let's Rob Charles" guy, but he turns him down. Angel spots Sylvie, drugged up and being prepped to perform on stage. He quickly takes her to a closet, trying to get through to Kimmie. He insists she stay hidden for now, as he has to perform on stage. Kimmie and Horace's talk is interrupted by a doctor who tells him Roy is alive and has just been brought in. Horace visits Roy, unleashing years of pent-up anger. Despite Roy's apologies, Horace continues to lash out, revealing that Roy had attempted suicide several times growing up. Horace physically attacks Roy with his cane, but Roy snaps, bitterly telling Horace he can't wait for him to die. It's clear that there's deep animosity between them, but why does Horace hate Roy so much? When Horace leaves, he tells Roy he'll regret their confrontation. Roy questions Mallory about why she's sitting with him in the hospital without cameras around for her usual show. He tells her to leave, but Mallory refuses. Does she genuinely care for Roy, or is it all about the family shares? Rain is recovering, still groggy, but tells Kimmie to trust Horace, believing he can help. As Rain falls back to sleep, Kimmie checks her phone and finds a message from Angel, revealing where Sylvie is being kept. Kimmie urgently calls Angel to get Sylvie out of the closet, but time is running out. Felicia and Jules' corrupt cops quickly realize what Angel is up to, leading to a confrontation at the club. In the midst of the chaos, Angel is forced onto the stage. Roy is still in the hospital, in pain despite the high-dose pain meds. Mallory tells the doctor that Roy has an opioid problem. He's built up an immunity to painkillers and shouldn't be given any more. Roy, frustrated, asks her to leave. Mallory obliges, but not before swiping his phone. Curious about who he's been seeing, she checks his messages and finds one from Kimmie mentioning a strip club. Immediately, she calls Charles, who had previously invited her to one. She asks for the name of the club he had mentioned, and he tells her, Delinda's Dolls. With that, Mallory heads straight there. Jules arrives to visit Roy, and Roy wastes no time. He outright tells him that Kimmie pushed him, and he wants to return the favor. Jules, however, suggests another route, handing Kimmie over to Mallory to appease her. He reminds Roy that he's already covered up the hit and run for him, and right now, he needs to keep his hands clean. But Roy isn't satisfied with that. He wants to handle this himself. Instead, Jules proposes a compromise. Both Roy and Mallory will get their turns at punishing Kimmie. Norman overhears men discussing Olivia's setup of Horace's robbery and how she shot Tony before cleaning up the body. But Norman isn't interested in that. He's looking for Debo. When Norman finally finds him, Debo insists that he killed Ina. Norman starts to believe him, until Debo mentions that Jules simply let him go. That doesn't sit right with Norman. Sensing deception, Norman pulls out a knife, ready to interrogate Debo properly. Horace calls Varney, instructing him to find a judge the family doesn't know, and to gather the legal team at his house tomorrow. He also requests that Varney set up a video recording. Varney agrees, but once again brings up the false rumors about him having an affair with Mallory. Horace, already aware the rumors are baseless, hints that he knows Varney is actually gay, telling him, "When you aren't speaking, you're talking, and I don't miss a thing." At the club, Mallory arrives and sits with Charles, as she subtly scans the crowd for Kimmie. She questions Felicia, even handing her money. In return, Felicia shows Mallory a picture of Kimmie. That's all she needs. Mallory immediately leaves the club, likely heading straight for her target. Horace finally catches up with Kimmie. Together, they formulate a plan to extract Sylvie with Angel's help. The idea? Angel will find out Sylvie's stage name, and Horace will request her as a client. Once Sylvie is outside, they'll make their move. Kimmie calls Angel, letting him know what's happening, and telling him to trust Horace. But before Angel can act, Traxon, who was already waiting after they found Sylvie, ambushes him, locking him in the closet when he goes to check on Sylvie. Horace arrives at the club as planned, and asks for a young blood to be sent out to him, as he couldn't get Sylvie's name from Angel. At that moment, Felicia brings Sylvie outside, preparing her to meet a new customer in the parking lot. That customer? Horace. Inside his truck, Horace reassures Sylvie, and Kimmie speaks to her over the phone to trust Horace. But there's a problem. You can't just walk out with a stripper. They need a distraction. Thinking fast, Kimmie sacrifices herself. She crashes her stolen car through the club's parking gate, creating chaos. With all eyes on Kimmie, Horace takes advantage of the moment and speeds off with Sylvie unnoticed. But Kimmie doesn't get far. Jules snatches her up and drags her back inside. Norman sneaks into Olivia's house and perches on her bed. But Olivia immediately pulls a gun from under her blanket. Norman, however, isn't here to fight. He begs Olivia for forgiveness for trying to kill Charles. His brutal interrogation of Debo has finally confirmed that Debo, not Horace, killed his wife. It was all one big misunderstanding. With this realization, Norman surrenders to peace. Back at the club, Angel escapes from the closet, only to find the place nearly deserted. Everyone has scattered, fearing the police are on their way. The once lively club has been shut down in a hurry, leaving only Jules and Kimmie alone in the main room. Jules wastes no time. He beats Kimmie down, mocking her and demanding to know where her sister is. But before Kimmie can respond, Traxon interrupts. Sylvie has escaped with some old guy. Jules immediately orders Traxon to go after the man, but Kimmie insists they can't. That only makes Jules more suspicious. He demands to know who the old guy is, but Kimmie refuses to talk. Losing patience, Jules orders Felicia to beat Kimmie until she confesses. Angel, now free, calls Rain and tells her Kimmie has been captured. Rain, in turn, rings Horace, warning him of the situation. With Kimmie's life on the line, Horace returns to the club. He makes sure both Kimmie and Angel are released before turning his attention to Jules and the others. Jules tries to explain himself, arguing that Kimmie nearly killed Roy and he was only there to teach her a lesson. He insists he has no real ties to the club. Kimmie and Sylvie are reunited, but Sylvie suddenly passes out. She's been pumped full of drugs. Panicked, Kimmie rushes her to the hospital. But on the way, Sylvie regains consciousness and starts muttering about a man staring at her from the back seat. At first, Kimmie assumes she's hallucinating from the drugs, but then she looks back. It turns out the father-in-law of the woman whose car Kimmie hijacked is inside the car. Back at the club, Jules and Horace's conversation takes a strange turn. Horace suddenly stops responding. A few moments later, when he snaps back to reality and gets up to leave, his pants are wet. Jules is confused. Angel, however, knows about Horace's illness and rushes him to their private hospital, where he receives treatment. Afterward, Angel crashes in Rain's room. But Rain has a bigger plan in mind. She wants them to work together to get Horace on their side. If they can get Kimmie to do Horace's bidding, it could be their way out of this mess. Jules receives a call from Norman, who casually informs him that he's killed Debo. But Jules has bigger questions. What is Horace's connection to Kimmie and Angel? Wanting answers, Jules heads to Mallory and Roy's place to break the news. Kimmie knows who Horace is. Soon after, Varney arrives with more updates. Horace has called for a big family meeting in an hour. However, Varney doesn't believe Horace has found a loophole in the will. He's convinced it's ironclad. But in private, Roy warns Jules to keep his involvement in the club a secret. What exactly is Roy doing for the club? Later that night, as Rain and Angel watch the news, they spot a breaking story. The woman whose car Kimmie stole is making headlines. It turns out her father-in-law, the man in the back seat, has dementia and needs his insulin ASAP, or he'll die. There's now a $100,000 reward for turning Kimmie in. The season finale opens with Kimmie stepping into Horace's hospital room. Sylvie is recovering, and Horace takes this moment to clarify. He had no idea about the strip club, but he has a proposition for Kimmie, a lifeline, if she's willing to take it. Horace wants to marry Kimmie. This isn't a proposal of love. It's a power move. Varney had previously explained that shares pass to a spouse, rather than immediate family. If Horace marries Kimmie, he cuts his ungrateful kids out of his fortune. Horace doesn't hide his disdain. He hates them all. But in his own twisted way, he also wants to help Kimmie. Kimmie isn't buying it. There has to be a catch. Taking this deal means a lifetime of looking over her shoulder. The Bellary family will never accept her sitting on their empire. But Horace tells her the will states that if anyone dies a mysterious death, no one gets anything, and also if someone commits a felony, they do not get anything. Kimmie says, but she's killed 2 people. Horace shrugs it off. No one knows. Kimmie, however, reminds him that Jules does. Horace isn't worried. He has Jules by the balls. Jules has a wife, a kid, a respectable life. He can't afford for his secrets to come out. Even with this assurance, Kimmie needs time to think. As Kimmie steps out, Angel warns her to lay low. The son of the man in the stolen car is dangerous. Angel asks for the car key, planning to get the old man out. Kimmie left the key inside. Angel heads to the car and finds the old man already dead. The stench had drawn the attention of cops. Angel is arrested on the spot. Kimmie visits Sylvie, but the reunion is all but sweet. Sylvie blames Kimmie for leaving her at home, where Frank raped her every day and lying about her life. Kimmie apologizes. Their past remains fractured, but Kimmie steps up when the hospital threatens to kick Sylvie out. "I'm Mr. Horace Bellery's fiancé." The nurse's attitude shifts instantly, and she apologizes. At the hospital, Olivia is taking her church members on a tour around the hospital when she's served a class action lawsuit by Lena. Unfortunately for Lena, Olivia is always 10 steps ahead. Olivia slaps Lena multiple times, provoking her. Lena slaps Olivia in retaliation, but Olivia's family owns the hospital. So she posts only the footage of Lena slapping her online, making it seem like an unprovoked attack. Lena just walked right into her trap. Kimmie and Sylvie return to Horace's hospital room. Kimmie accepts the marriage. Sylvie stays behind to question Horace. Kimmie rushes to Rain to spill the tea. Rain? She's hyped. After Googling Horace's net worth, she nearly passes out. And when Kimmie confirms there's no prenup, "Oh, we rich, Rain's first thought? A good BBL. Priorities. The season ends with Horace calling Varney to bring the lawyers. The rest of the Bellery family catches wind and races to the hospital, but only Varney and the lawyers are allowed in. A cognitive test is conducted to confirm Horace is of sound mind. Rain serves as the witness. While this is happening, Varney tries to trick Kimmie into the lobby, where the angry Bellery family awaits. Kimmie refuses. Varney informs the family of Horace's decision. They put the pieces together. He's diluting their shares. Enraged, they storm Horace's hospital room. But they're too late. Horace smirks at his family and drops the bombshell. "Meet your new boss. My wife, Kimmie." The whole family is dumbfounded. What did you think of the show? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe.